Hello and welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and my co-host today, Adam Bexson. This week we take you through looking into the Lifespan Fund from the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and World Domination, and we talk about property and pensions a little bit, and then we take a look at what's been happening at the Pensions Regulator with their annual funding statement and a report on scale. Right, Adam, our first story, you're going to talk to us a little bit about the work of the modestly titled, I'm going to read this to get it right, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Oh, the ego.
Yeah.
And the Lifespan Fund. So what's your thoughts on this and maybe a quick summary of what it is?
Well, for those that aren't familiar, what the Lifespan Fund is the Tony Blair Institute's consideration of an alternative to a state pension. So the state pension, we know it's got loads of challenges. We know we've got the triple lock, which looks to increase the state pension as time goes by. There's lots of criticism about the state pension, though. So in terms of adequacy, well, actually, we've seen a big improvement there. People who are retired, actually, the state pension is far more generous than it was a few years ago. So that's a positive thing. But one of the issues with it, this report talks about, is the fact that it's far more generous to everybody. You know, you've got people who are really wealthy with long life expectancy, getting the same amount as maybe someone who is manual working for a long time, living in an area of the country where life expectancy isn't as high. So is that fair? That's one of the things that it's looking at. And what they're looking at within this is other points in your life as well. So one really positive point, actually, I think, is looking at building someone up a lifespan fund that the main aim is for retirement, but actually if there's other points in somebody's life where it could be useful, maybe halfway through their career, they feel, right, actually it'd be really good to retrain, to become qualified in something else and start another career. Some other aspects could work well there. So some aspects of it, I think, could work well, but actually it's a very complicated mix of things that they're looking at here. I think it's another great example of trying to use pension policy to solve not just pensions, but also other aspects as well. And this actually can cause a lot of issues. I think you could be skewing the economy in different ways. You could end up in areas where people have higher life expectancy. Could you be seeing people change their behaviour because of what's going to happen with this lifespan fund, and what kind of issues could that bring us as well?
Yeah, no, I avoided talking about it last week because I was trying to deal with not hangovers necessarily, but the hangover from a number of events and things. I must say I wasn't a fan of this. A lot of the areas of this I didn't like, particularly the suggestion to use people's health data to anticipate how long they were going to live at some point. I mean, there's all sorts of issues with, again, you're talking about behaviour. You know, people might start making different behaviours, thinking, oh, well, if I smoke and everything else, I might get a better pension. Some sort of use of personal data, not particularly comfortable with, but also just how inaccurate that can be and what the point of that is. I've just felt that was a bit dangerous and probably not the most well thought out idea. And like you, a lot of issues with pensions being asked to solve so many different problems. We know housing is a problem. We know people want to live in, that's the constant battle. I think we'll segue into the other story we want to talk about. But the big battle that's constantly being fought around people's priorities is housing and pensions. And we know that people retiring with housing debt or expenses or mortgage or rent will have a poorer retirement, because that will be a big drain on a lower income. Most people retire on a lower income than they work. And so, trying to have something that fights both battles, I think just masks the problem that are wider societal problems. If we need housing for people to live, well, let's invest and build new houses. I just think that's the only answer to this, rather than trying to make a financial solution do this, which will only succeed in heating up the property market and making property prices higher, making it harder for everyone to, unless you've got a lifespan fund or a whatever else, a Lisa or Lysa or whatever, all these other products that have been and gone and tried to deal with this. Unless you can have one of those, then you're going to struggle again. And so the disparity between people who are workers and the middle income, these kind of things, they'll be able to get there and afford it. But then we have a whole cohort of people that just will never get there because they wouldn't even have the products to do it. So, and we had this SPP. I think they did a survey on a webinar saying that 90% of pension professionals think that pensions and property need to work together, or for some kind of solution. I didn't quite understand the survey, if I'm honest. If they're saying
Mm.
90% pension professionals think that pensions should be helping with property, then well, I'm in a 10% minority. But I'm not sure it's saying that. I'm not sure whether they're saying that it's just good if people don't have housing debt in retirement. And if they're saying that, then I'm with the majority. I don't know. I don't know what your take was.
Yeah, I think I think there's two aspects. One is housing debt in retirement. So we're thinking about mortgages, but I think we've then also got to think about the knock-on effect of propping up that property market. Because if we keep property values artificially high, that doesn't just impact mortgage costs, it impacts rent costs as well. Unless we start having lots of really strong rent controls in place as well. So it just really does smack of another way to artificially inflate that property market, which is really negative. Yes, it solves that immediate problem. It puts a nice, fresh, clean sticking plaster on that issue, but it doesn't actually help the root cause. So
Well,
I
I
think we
suppose,
need to maybe stop looking at using pensions to solve all of the different economic points that are out
yeah.
there.
That's right. I was just going to come in because you were sort of talking about the sticking plaster. Even if they did say today, well, we're going to build a product or we're going to create a solution that allows people to do pensions and property. Well, let's say they say, oh, you can take £10,000 out of your pension towards a deposit or something like that. Whatever. They just announce it today. You think all the consultations, all the tax implications, all the things that will need to be taken into account. Is it part of your tax free cash in the future? Is it taxable? Is it something elseable? Is it just exempt from everything? The number of consultation things, it won't happen for 3 years, let's say, until they do the
Oh, yeah.
consultation legislation. So the sticking plaster, by the time we get it, we've got another 3-4 years have gone by. Then, is it a ring fence part of new saving, or is it something? I think of all the different ways you could try to construct it. It won't come in any meaningful way for about 5 years, maybe even 10 years. And by then you just think, let's just build some houses again. Let's just build some houses. What are we talking about? The government wanting investment in the UK. I read at the weekend the FT was saying about how they're looking to overseas to get £99 billion of overseas pensions investment in the country. I think interestingly, in the Pension Schemes Act, which is talking about UK investment from UK pension, I think the government is thinking this is going to be a harder fight now that reserve power is a bit weaker. We might have to go
Mm.
overseas. And what do we use that money? I don't mind. I don't mind where the money comes from. If an Australian pension fund wants to invest in the UK and build some housing, do it. I don't know if it's fill that, but I just think let's just find that investment and let's build those houses.
And the TPR funding statement as well. Could you walk us through that a little bit more and give us a bit more of an update there?
Yeah, I can do. So those of us with long memories will remember annual funding statements of the past, running to hundreds of pages, dealing with different scenarios of schemes in deficit and how they can deal with that, and covenant and all this kind of things. But the annual funding statements for the last couple of years have been very short, and this latest one is no different. So I'll be honest, it isn't that interesting. It's more notable the fact that it is just recognising the world that we're in, with DB schemes a lot more in surplus, or at least better funded. And so the questions are all around that kind of end game, strategizing, making sure trustees are thinking about what their end game journey looks like, and also that they're planning ahead for what any surplus is in the scheme, where that will go, who's going to get that member's employer, combination of the two, and getting those sort of discussions in early, because they can be quite complex depending on rules and the views of and history of the scheme and the trustees. They do highlight an area of risk, and I've mentioned it on this Pensions Den before, that cyber risk remains probably one of the biggest systemic risks the regulator sees in the sector. So making sure that trustees are up to date with their understanding their cyber risks and aren't doing anything that puts them at risk, but also their sponsors as well, because that they could be subject to a cyber attack as well. So yeah, just making sure that ecosystem is secure as it can be. And then, sorry, I will go for one last thing while we've got time, is the regulator has done a report on scale in the DC sector, which is interesting and slightly amusing, I think, for those of us with a certain sense of humour, because they've come out and said that scale is no guarantee for good member outcomes. and in the context of the Pension Schemes Act, which is talking about trying to get mega funds, big schemes in the next sort of 10 years or so, about £25 billion, they're saying that doesn't necessarily mean better outcomes. So it's a slightly awkward statement, I think, from the regulator. Not sure if they're on the same page as the government on this one. And it's something the industry knows. Even if you look at any tables of investment performance or charges, there's a real range of things going on, and scale isn't always a determinant for good or bad or whatever. I think it's interesting when you take a step back and think, well, what is scale? So the government said 25 billion. It feels like an arbitrary number to me. A £10 billion scheme could have such good outcomes as a 25 billion. And I think over the next few years, I think we're going to see this conversation develop a little bit as this consolidation that we're expecting over the next few years happens. There might be a few schemes that are sub-scale, sub 25 billion, that might be thinking, well, we can justify our existence because of the VFM framework. We're providing good outcomes. We should be allowed to stick around.
I think that's a great example, though, when we're looking at the use of pensions as a policy tool, and then actually it should be focusing on pensions, retirement income, giving people good retirement outcomes, rather than looking at other areas as well, such as getting pension investment into different areas of the economy. Okay, so thanks for joining us today, everybody. Thanks for listening to our thoughts and views on pension policy and what it should focus on and maybe where it tries to stretch a little bit too far. Thanks for joining us, and see you again next time.